From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Are you still sleeping?
I just wanted to check and make sure that we were on schedule.
The first technology of its kind.
Mom and Dad, I have great news.
Is now providing answers families need. Siemens. Answers.
We believe that if love is a chemical reaction, chemistry has a good chance to make the world a more harmonious place. Chemistry works so that bandages end up loving the water. Families are less afraid of energy bills. And even cars and clean air get along better. That's why we don't just make chemicals, we create chemistry. BASF, the chemical company.
Issue 1, Contraction Blues. The U.S. economy in the fourth quarter of last year, 2012, October, November, December, contracted by 0.1%. 0.1%. It was the first contraction in 3 years, and it rattled financial markets. Much of the slippage in gross domestic product, GDP, was due to what the U.S. Federal Reserve described as, quote, weather-related disruptions and other transitory facts, unquote. The central bank is keeping monetary policy on hold and says it will continue to buy long-term securities until there is a substantial improvement in the outlook for the labor market. Also, the cutback in Department of Defense outlays is likely to fuel concerns about the size of a slowdown and the full economic fallout of the large, quote-unquote, sequester cuts scheduled for a month from now, the start of March. The president's press secretary said this about the sequester, quote, across-the-board cuts to education, to research and development would have, repeat, would have, damaging effects on our economy and our long-term economic prospects, unquote. A growing number of analysts believe that the political will to stop the sequester is lacking. It will take effect, at least temporarily, they believe, and that will pose a further risk to the economy in the first half of this year. Question. The Fed is saying that the fourth quarter contraction, October, November, December of 2012, was due chiefly to quote-unquote transitory factors. Is this true, or is the recovery stalling out, Pat Buchanan?
I think basically it's true, John. The U.S. economy is out of the intensive care it was in 2007, 2008, but it's been walking the hospital halls ever since. The growth has been growing at an average of about 2%. Unemployment is where it was when Barack Obama took office. We're adding about 150,000 jobs a month. But John, the real problem here is this slow growth is occurring when we've had 5 straight trillion-dollar deficits to pump it up. The Fed has put $3 trillion into the economy, and we get $85 billion a month in transfusions into the economy from the Fed, and we're still limping along like a mature and, quite frankly, modest economy.
Helena.
Well, I think these numbers reflect the fact that government is shrinking and the Defense Department really pulled back in the last quarter of last year. And so it's a cautionary sign if they do go ahead with the sequester. And it looks like both parties are kind of sleepwalking their way towards the sequester. The Republicans don't want to give up anything on the revenue side. They'd rather take the hit in defense spending than give up any tax cuts. And the Democrats have protected Social Security and Pell Grants and Medicaid, and so they're not going to cave first. And so if neither party blinks, the sequester will go ahead and we'll see further contraction in the economy. But, you know, I'm not that gloomy. I take my cue from Mark Zandi, not Pat Buchanan. And
Mark Zandi?
Mark Zandi is an accomplished economist, and he's saying 2013 we're going to basically go along with sort of steady, modest growth, but the housing market is truly coming back, and 2014 looks like it's going to be.
Tell Mark Zandi the consumer confidence dropped from 58.6%. and to 58.6%.
Well, they just lost their payroll tax cut.
8.1% decline December to January.
They just lost their payroll tax cut. No wonder.
I think you have to look at the big picture here, and the job numbers that came out Friday were encouraging, but even business experts were looking at the big picture and seeing that the economy is still in job growth has been terribly sluggish, and it's been terribly sluggish for a really long time. We're still hovering around 8% unemployment. When is this going to end? And no one sees it ending soon, and that's bad news overall.
What do you think, Mark?
Well, I think the economy remains weak at very best. You have to, as Pat was saying, you look at this economy in the context of the biggest fiscal stimulus we've ever had in our history, $25 billion a week in terms of a deficit spending trying to goose up the economy. Secondly, $85 billion a month coming out of the Federal Reserve, the loosest monetary policy we've ever had. We can barely get the economy to grow. Here it's been going down. It was 2.4% last year. Then 1.8%, if that, maybe even less, 1.8% this year, despite all of this stimulus. So the economy is continuing to slow. It's not even staying flat.
So you're saying that we're in for several quarters of low growth.
Well, we don't know. We hope it is going to be several quarters of low growth. Anything can happen in an economy this fragile that could turn it into a recession and a contraction of GDP.
That would be a double dip recession.
That's right, it would be.
Is that your prediction?
No, I don't know. All I can say,
I know you don't know. Well, where do you think the odds are?
I think the economy is going to stay very weak, and if there is any single event, the collapse of the Spanish banking system or what have you, anything of a single event will create such a lack of confidence in the economy that you'll have a big cutback.
Do you think we should have confidence in what the Federal Reserve is saying in view of what it said in 2007? No, shall I review that history with you?
You can, by all means.
Recently released Fed minutes show how wrong the entire Federal Reserve was in 2007 about the depth of the crisis. Right. They thought it was only a blip in the subprime mortgage markets. They could easily be wrong now, in which case we are actually entering a double-dip recession.
That's right. I think there's at least a 50-50 chance that we're going to end up with a double-dip recession. That is, you'll have at least one quarter, maybe two quarters of decline in GDP.
I wish I had a nickel for every time you projected a double-dip recession on this show over the last 2 years. It hasn't occurred.
Maybe it's keeping it away.
Okay. All right. It's like carrying an umbrella when it rains, when it's not raining. I got it. Thanks.
Is what we are experiencing, as the Fed says, a contraction, or is it something longer lasting and more serious, Pat Buchanan? Yes or no?
I think there's a possibility. I mean, we're in something of a contraction. We just went through it. I think we're in a permanent period of growth at about 2% or something like that. The old dynamism we used to get after the the Carter recession, that has never come back.
What could goose the slow growth?
There is nothing that can do it. If the Fed is $85 billion a month, $3 trillion added in.
Feeding that in.
$5 straight trillion dollar deficits, and we're at 2%.
I have a lot.
Lord Keynes,
you're plunging me into deeper depression.
Where are you, Lord Keynes, now that we need you?
I have a lot more confidence in American ingenuity. I'm sure before Silicon Valley erupted and before the internet came on the scene, Pat had his gloom and doom then. Something will happen. It might be in the energy field.
Put Susan in here.
What
do you think and why?
We're sort of creeping toward a decline, as Pat was saying. We're not in a double-dip recession. We're always so vulnerable. It'll just take one big event to knock us into that double dip. And look at the real unemployment rate, which is supposedly around 11%. If you were to use the numbers of people who really need a job, not just those who are really participating in the workforce.
Way higher than 11%.
Yeah, and that's a real picture of what's
consumer
happening.
confidence?
Consumer confidence has dropped, and one of the reasons it's dropped, by the way, is that there's been a huge evaporation of wealth for the average American family. Their single largest asset was their home equity. That's down 40 to 50%. Nobody's getting increases in wages. A lot of people are being let out. It's no wonder that people are uncomfortable.
Payroll taxes gone up.
Payroll taxes have gone up.
Have tax rates generally gone up?
Yes.
No.
Capital gains went up.
Only for a couple of people.
Only for the so-called rich.
Yeah, exports are weak, but they have held up reasonably.
But
we're better off than Europe. We're much better off than Europe.
For now.
It's a worldwide slowdown. We're actually doing pretty damn well.
What about the imbalance with China? Trade
imbalance will be an all-time record last year, John, when the figures come out in February.
The answer is it's too close to call. Issue 2, heat over Hagel. Commander-in-Chief Barack Obama has nominated Charles Chuck Hagel for Secretary of Defense. Hagel testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee this week. Here's Senator John McCain grilling Hagel about Hagel's opposition to the surge in Iraq in 2007.
Were you correct in your assessment?
Well, I would defer to the judgment of history to sort that out. But the
committee deserves your judgment as to whether you were right or wrong about the surge.
I'll explain why I made those comments. And
I want to know if you were right or wrong. That's a direct question. I expect a direct answer.
Senator Hagel explained that he opposed the surge in Iraq because it cost nearly 1,200 American lives.
I saw the consequences and the suffering and the horror of war. So I did question a surge. I always ask the question, is this going to be worth the sacrifice? Because there will be sacrifice.
That was Hagel's emphasis on the cost factor. My question is, did his emphasis on the cost factor in military decisions serve as a dodge to Senator McCain's bullet? Or did he mean this completely from the heart? And if he did mean it completely from the heart, isn't he exactly the man we want over at the Department of Defense? The cost factor.
He was talking about the cost of lives.
That's correct.
And I think in that exchange that you showed, John McCain indicated how personal the surge is for him. He wants us to forget what folly the invasion of Iraq is and just concentrate on what he considers the success of the surge.
How do you know that? Are you divining that about McCain? Or did you see evidence of that?
I am listening to him. He wants it to be all about the surge. And Senator Hagel is correctly recalling what a disaster the invasion of Iraq was, and he's not going to sit there and defend one element of the tactic, the surge, which allowed us to get out with our head somewhat held high.
Saved the United States from a disastrous defeat in 2006. I supported the surge, but Hagel is right in this sense. The surge saved us from a defeat in a war we should have never fought. We attacked Iraq. Why? To deprive it of weapons it did not have. We invaded, occupied. The war was the disaster. The war was the worst blunder since Vietnam.
Was McCain really trying to find out how the judgment of this candidate to be Secretary of Defense works and has worked, and whether he has the judgment to have this so important job where you're sending people in to lose their lives potentially?
You want the Secretary of Defense to want to defend our country, and that's what we were doing over in Iraq. And that's what the surge was about, too, ultimately. And it was deemed a success, and McCain said to Hagel, you're on the wrong side of history on this one. I think McCain is right on that point, regardless of whether we got into the war legitimately or not. Hagel's overall problem, though, at that hearing wasn't just that exchange with McCain. By the end of the day, people had almost forgotten about that exchange with McCain because he had stumbled and really floundered throughout that hearing over even basic questions about the military. At one point, he did tell, well, on our stance on containment in Iran, he didn't know basic questions. He talked about it as though we weren't containment versus prevention. Very important.
Whereas with a nuclear weapon, our policy, Obama's policy is
to prevent
we'll prevent
and
a nuclear weapon, and we will not adopt the policy of containment.
At one point, he said, if I am nominated, if I am cleared through Congress and I become the next Secretary of Defense, I will learn and know a lot more about this. That's not what you want to hear from the upcoming Secretary of Defense.
He came across as someone...
You want to know already before they get in. You want to have some sense of expertise about the job and some real desire for it. I didn't really sense that.
Well, can't he be...
learn on the job? Sure.
No, I think his judgment is whether or not... Not whether he's as a doctrinaire command of the data like Buchanan every week. What does that mean?
You want him to sound, you compare him to John Kerry's hearing days earlier. Again, a Democrat, a liberal. He impressed.
He's been sitting over the facts and figure stuff
in hearing and on the floor in one day. But
Susan is right to the extent he came across as someone who has not played at this level of the game for the last several years. He's been teaching at Georgetown. But I think his overall posture on all these issues is right in line with the president's, and he's not going to be creating policy at the Defense Department. He's going to be carrying out, and his job was not to appear the smartest one in the room. It was to get nominated. He didn't give them any. He didn't take the bait. He didn't give them a headline. He's going to get confirmed.
I disagree. I think he did give them a headline.
There was some loose talk about, well, I don't want to characterize it. I don't want to prejudice your judgment, as though I could do that. But there was some talk about Hagel being vagrantly or really anti-Semitic. What was that?
I don't know about that.
Well, let me tell you about it. Brett Stevens of the Wall Street Journal. I hope I've got that man right.
Yes.
You got that guy right.
Huh?
You got him right.
Okay. He kind of suggested that by reason of what?
But I think there have been a whole host of statements by the incoming Secretary of Defense that were perceived as being, shall we say, hostile to Israel and not supportive of Israel.
He was talking about AIPAC's activity in the United States
That's
Congress.
one of the things. And
he says the Jewish what? Lobby.
That's right.
And that's supposed to be a bad way to characterize AIPAC?
No, it isn't a bad way, but it was not meant in a positive way, the way he put it, because he said it prompted the Congress to do a lot of stupid things. And somebody challenged him and said, tell us what stupid things we did.
Let me tell you how he cleared this this charge, if that's what it is, this rap.
Yeah.
Charles Schumer did what? He showed him around. He escorted him. And Charles Schumer and he met, Hagel met, before that happened.
That's right.
Now, you know Charles Schumer.
I do, very well.
Now, would Charles Schumer function as negating anything about the anti-Semitic business that rap phony, and that probably phony rap?
Pat's already laughing because he knows that I've got a difficult answer.
He's not anti-Semitic, John. He's a critic of Israel, and he's a critic of the Israeli lobby.
Why would Schumer escort him around?
Schumer is the deputy leader of the Democrats in the Senate.
Yeah.
This is his job, okay?
I certainly understand. But someone his
endorsement matters.
You want to tell me something we don't know about what Schumer thinks about Hagel?
No, I don't. I've never talked to him. I've never talked to Schumer.
Schumer is convinced he is not anti-Semitic.
I still don't think Schumer would have escorted him the way he did.
Exactly.
Especially the pleasantries that obviously
he doesn't believe.
I'm really shocked to find out that kind of language used by people who aren't totally sincere.
John, Schumer does not believe the man is anti-Semitic. He is a critic of Israel. He's been a critic of the Israeli lobby, and he used the wrong term when he called it the Jewish lobby.
There is no doubt, I'm settling this for the group, that
Chuck Schumer,
not Chuck Schumer,
Chuck Hagel,
Chuck Hagel will be confirmed by the United States Senate. No doubt.
No doubt.
I would,
even you.
I would say
even you.
70%.
Wait a minute.
I think there is a doubt because they need 5 Republicans to clear.
I don't think they'll filibuster.
Well, if someone filibusters,
but I think the Democrats. He had a rough hearing, John. I like him.
He had a rough hearing. A lot of rough hearings.
100%.
Teaching at Georgetown, he's not preparing for the hearing.
He did not do as well as I hoped he did, and I'm a Schumer guy.
It's not a Schumer
Excuse me, I'm a Hagel guy. Like that.
This is getting a little boring now. Issue 3, updating immigration.
The politics on this issue have been turned upside down. For the first time ever, there's more political risk in opposing immigration reform than in supporting it.
There was a mighty political push this week for changing U.S. immigration law with a bipartisan group of senators dubbed the Gang of 8 on Monday proposing a major overhaul. Along with Democrat Chuck Schumer, New York, the Senate plan is backed by Democrats Robert Menendez, New Jersey, Dick Durbin, Illinois, Michael Bennet, Colorado, Republicans John McCain, Arizona, Marco Rubio, Florida, Lindsey Graham, South Carolina, Jeff Flake, Arizona. Some details. First, beef up border security. More agents, more drones. 2, entry-exit system to track visas of temporary visitors to make sure they exit. Then for the 11 million illegal immigrants already here, a change to get quote-unquote probationary legal status. That's if they come forward and successfully, 1, pass background checks, 2, pay fines and owe taxes, 3, learn English and U.S. civics. These temporarily legal citizens can then apply for full citizenship. There are also new fines and penalties against employers who knowingly hire illegal workers. 5 years ago in 2007, Republicans defeated a similar plan. But John McCain says this time may be different. The Hispanic vote is needed, and Republicans don't have it.
You look at the demographics of this country and the rising Hispanic population, we're not going to win races. Times have changed, Americans have changed, elections have changed. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy, and I'm not saying we're going to succeed this time, but I think the chances are better than they've ever been.
President Obama is also determined to see major immigration reform.
We need Congress to act on a comprehensive approach that finally deals with the 11 million undocumented immigrants who are in the country right now.
Question, how likely is it that immigration reform will pass this year? We have one question and one answer each. Pat Buchanan.
The path to citizenship, in my judgment, is going to fail. It will certainly be stopped in the House, and I think Marco Rubio, who's gotten himself out front on it, will be badly damaged because I think there's going to be a rising populist reaction to this proposal.
Will the legislation pass?
No, the path to citizenship will not.
What?
It'll pass the Senate probably with 70-plus votes, and then the House is problematical for the very reasons that Pat just outlined. Republicans don't like giving the undocumented immigrants a path to citizenship, and if they block that, the Democrats have a hell of an issue going into 2014 midterm elections.
Ellen, I never thought you'd use that language in public that way.
H-E-L-L-U-V-A.
Only a weakened version of what we just saw can get through because of the amnesty issue. It's an amnesty issue, and it just isn't going to work. Maybe you'll sell it in the Senate. Even there may be some problems, but you get it over to the House, and you've got a big faction of folks there that just aren't going to tolerate that kind of thing. I know, I've talked to them.
Yeah, you remember that, how Rubio gave a terrific speech, and he never once had to use the word amnesty.
No, they don't like to use that word,
we
but
don't like
we'll
to
start
use that
hearing
word,
about
and
it.
we don't have to use that word.
It isn't amnesty.
I'm not.
It is amnesty.
It's
It's amnesty to people who. It's amnesty to people who will be voting on it in the House. Many
you
of
don't
them.
have to use that designation.
Yes, I do.
I believe the bill will pass both the Senate and the House, particularly with Pat Buchanan's support.
And I agree with that, and I agree that Rubio has not been hurt at all. In fact, he could be a rising star. Issue 4, Egypt on the edge.
بدعم وتوافق عربي.
State of emergency. That's what Egypt's President Mohamed Morsi announced this week, plus a curfew to curtail violent protests that have raged in several Egyptian cities. At least 54 people have died. Another warning came from the country's army chief, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, that Egypt's political strife is pushing the country to the quote-unquote collapse of the state, particularly the near anarchy in 3 cities along the Suez Canal. And in Cairo, a mob ransacked the historic 5-star Intercontinental Hotel. It's been 2 years since the Arab Spring swept Hosni Mubarak from power. The new president, Mohamed Morsi, wrested power from the military 5 months ago. Morsi is an Islamist who is aligned with the Muslim Brotherhood. He is accused of rushing a vote on an Islamist-backed constitution in December. Adding to the unrest is Egypt's weak economy. Egypt's credit rating was downgraded from a B+ to a B this week by the global rating agency Fitch, which cited instability. The urgency of Egypt's climate brought leaders of all political stripes on Thursday to a rare meeting. Included in the talks were representatives from the Muslim Brotherhood, the ultra-conservative Salafis, and secular and liberal factions, including Mohammed el-Baradei and his National Liberation Front. The group issued a statement calling for a national dialogue, one that, quote, all the components of the Egyptian society participate without any exclusion, unquote, as, quote, the only means to resolve any problems or disagreements, unquote.
Question, has Egyptian President Morsi overplayed his hand, Mort Zuckerman?
Well, he's certainly at the borderline of overplaying his hand. He's losing a lot of support. The country is in terrible shape economically. The even more extreme zealots in that country are now opposed to him. He has lost the center. He's got real problems in maintaining his position. I don't think the Egyptian army has yet sort of made clear where they're going to come out on all of this, because that is going to be the determining factor and force in who comes out ahead, and he will only survive if the army stays with him.
Pat.
That's exactly right, John. But
who's right? Mort's right?
Yeah, the Muslim Brotherhood is really losing support, and the Salafis, the hard right guys.
What's that again? Salafi?
The Salafi Muslims are getting together with the Tahrir Square gang, but it's unnatural alliance. And the military guys have said, look, we are in real danger of having a collapse of the state, and that's why I agree the United States should maintain its lines to the Egyptian military, send them the jets, because they may wind up as the guys on top in the primary country in the Arab world.
Really? What about the role that Egypt played in the breakout of the Palestinians in
the Gaza war? They played a positive
Gaza
role.
And Morsi's role there. Eleanor, you want to address that?
Well, I think Morsi has had some good moments on the international stage, but he has frozen out the secular minority in Egypt, and they, combined with the Salafis, the far-right Islamists, are making his rule rather untenable. I mean, they're losing civil order in the country. Yeah. The army is still alive and well, and basically they are the governing authority.
We send Israel about $2 billion, Egypt $2 billion a year. We're also giving them, apparently giving them F-16s, the beautiful bombers, to Morsi. You think that's a good idea?
We need to stay allied with Egypt, I think. We need to, rather than just leave this vacuum where more radical folks can step in. We want to keep the connection. We want to keep Israel an ally.
So you think Morsi is a good guy?
Egypt an ally, right.
No.
I mean Egypt.
When they send those jets to the Egyptian army, they understand that the army is the basis of American support in that country.
False prediction. The Keystone Pipeline will be approved by President Obama. Yes or no?
Yes, they solved the Nebraska problem.
Right, I agree. The State Department will give the go-ahead.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, and it's a big deal. The McLaughlin Group joins me in remembering and saluting Ed Koch, former mayor of New York, and occasional guest panelist on the group. Our thoughts and prayers are with his loved ones. May Ed rest in peace. Bye-bye.
Are you still sleeping?
I just wanted to check and make sure that we were on schedule.
The first technology of its kind.
Mom and Dad, I have great news.
Is now providing answers families need. Siemens answers.
We believe that if love is a chemical reaction, chemistry has a good chance to make the world a more harmonious place. Chemistry works so that bandages end up loving the water. Families are less afraid of energy bills. And even cars and clean air get along better. That's why we don't just make chemicals, we create chemistry. BASF, the chemical company.